Patrick and Reginald here for another episode of the podcast with our two special guests, Wolfgang and the Dirty Dago, off screen. So, let me ask you something. If gender is a social construct, how can there be transgender people? Because transgender people are people who are born in the wrong body. You know, their gender doesn't match their sex. So wouldn't that contradict gender as a social construct and really make it more of a biological argument that you have a female brain inside a male body? So wouldn't that make the progressive claim completely ridiculous and nonsensical?
The purpose of the statement that gender is a social construct is more towards the bias of a gender. Things that females are interested in. Right. Yeah. Things that females are interested in, things that males are interested in.
So they're just being dishonest here. They're not actually saying, they're saying that we socialize people incorrectly, but not that gender is a social construct.
Right. They're saying
so
gender roles.
So they're being inherently dishonest. No, well, there would be gender roles because if gender is not a social construct, genders would behave differently based on their evolutionary
like having kids.
Based on their evolutionary psychology. They would make their own choices and have their own preferences based on that.
And stereotypes.
So
you're saying
they're knowingly being dishonest by saying gender is a social construct.
No, what they're saying with gender as a social construct is they're essentially wanting us to stop stereotyping based on
that's
gender.
Not the same. That's not the same thing.
Gender.
That's
Maybe
not the same thing.
Maybe it's a misnomer co-opted by the movement. You know what I mean?
Right.
No, because
talking about what you identify with, like femininity.
What you're describing and what gender as a social construct is describing are different things.
Just makes no sense that gender itself is a social construct. Gender itself is both your physical
Gender
nature.
has to do specifically with you in terms of society. Sex is a
okay. So then how could there be transgender people? Because transgender people is basically saying that they're the wrong
That's not always
sex.
A transgendered person, though.
Because they're saying that if gender is socially constructed, then there would be no such thing as a transgender because they would just be the gender that they were socialized into, and there would be no gender dysphoria or some sort of crossover because whatever you're socialized in would be what it is. But if it's not the case that there is some sort of biological or physiological determinism of gender, then you could have transgenderism.
That's still putting all of gender into two categories.
So yeah,
we're talking. A transgender
talking.
person is a person between male and female. A transgender does not mean.
Yeah,
no, that's a separate thing. No, because there are people who would identify as non-binary gender. They would identify that, but a transgender person does not identify that. A transgender person.
Definition. That's semantics.
This is not semantics.
Someone saying
sex different.
Yes.
Your guys'
That's what he's saying, but
that's
then
not what I'm saying.
Yeah, but that's what's getting skewed here. Is that Ian is saying that you can't call sex gender, but to call someone transgender, it has to relate to their sex. The issue is that with the term gender, it has become interchangeable with sex. Yeah. It has become interchangeable with the sex you
No, what
are
I'm
born
saying
as.
is if just listen to this simple description. If gender is a social construct and you were socialized in your gender, then how could you be transgender? Because you would just be the gender that you were socialized with. How could you have some sort of dysphoria against what you were, quote-unquote, socialized in with? There is a biological or physiological counter against that these people who claim to be transgender say. Gender being a social construct doesn't make sense.
I've met many people who are transgender, and they weren't socially constructed to be the gender that they are inside of their bodies. They were still, as a female when they were young, taught to play with dolls, socially led to be feminine, socially led to do the things that females do, but they still inside of themselves realize that that is not who they are. Thus, it is no longer, yes, gender is a social construct. Yes, we as a society decided what makes that gender.
If gender is a social construct and what the gender roles are played are socialized, so what establishes gender roles is based on socialization. If you're socialized from your upbringing from an infant as a female, then how could you be transgender? Because you would just identify with. How could there be this counter to the socialization if gender is a social construct?
Because
I
you
see-
That's
feel
what I'm
like
saying.
you
I
were
see what you're-
male,
I see
but
what
you were
you're
brought
saying.
up as a female. You
No,
felt
that's
like
what
you
I'm
were
saying.
misled.
That's
No, but
no,
that's
but
not
you're
a
running
social
counter. You're
construct.
running counter to two simple
But-
premises here. If gender is a social construct, whatever you are socialized as is what you will identify as, because that's how
Exactly.
you were raised.
That's the
So
difference
how
here.
would it be possible to not be what you were socialized as if gender is a
They're
social
saying
construct?
gender as
Social
an
con- no, it's
idea
saying social
is
construct
built
is-
by
no.
social
No,
nature.
You're missing the
Exactly.
So-
The label.
The
of a gender.
idea of the gender
You
is
keep
a social
okay. No,
you're
construct.
address
missing the
the
point.
premises
The
I'm
social
saying.
That's
No,
what
I-
you're doing.
I understand what you're
one
saying,
At a time,
but-
one at a time. Address the point that I'm saying. I'll say it one more time just to be 100% clear. If gender is a social construct, then the gender that you identify with will be whatever you're socialized as.
Exactly, I understand.
So then how would it be possible to run against what you're socialized as if gender is a social construct?
And I understand
Now
what-
address those points specifically. Don't
Okay,
give a counterexample
I
or something like that.
agree
Address
with
those
you
specific points.
in the very literal sense that if it is constructed completely through social interaction, that you will be what you were socially constructed at. The problem is that the term, as it's a social construct when it's used, is not. It is completely and utterly defined by social construct. What they're saying is the roles of gender are socially constructed. They are not taking it. The people who use the gender is a social construct, don't look at it overarchingly.
But when,
they're not taking
when
in
transgender
the whole
people
picture.
when transgender people are talking, they're not talking about the specific roles that the genders are socialized into. They're not complaining about the roles. That's generally what the feminists complain about. They complain about feminine gender roles, masculine gender roles, and they want to try to break those down so females can do quote unquote traditionally masculine things.
Right.
Transgender people are not talking about gender roles at all. They are saying that they are misgendered, that they were socialized as a female, and now they're saying no, that's not actually what I am. I feel a male.
Right.
Now, if these are these are simply stated things. Gender is a social construct. Either that's true or it's false, or maybe you have some sort of, ambiguous definition of it. You have to address those points here.
No, and I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is that the whole concept that gender is a social construct, when that is said and used, it's not looking at the overarching concept that it is a construct. They're not saying it is the absolute building point. What they're utilizing it as is a less overarching
I mean, to me, it seems like
picture.
if you're saying gender is a social construct, it's pretty simple, it's pretty clear. Gender is socially constructed. So you're saying that they mean something else by what they're saying.
You're looking
There's
at
some
it
sort of double
very,
think going on
you're,
here.
You're looking at it very black and white.
No, I'm
And-
just listening to what they're saying.
No,
They're saying
yeah, of
gender
course.
is a social construct. If somebody says A is B,
A is B.
if somebody
Right.
just say A is B, then it's A is B. If somebody says
Right.
gender is a social construct, I take them to mean that gender is socially constructed.
is completely
But if
socially
there's some
constructed,
sort
which
of
is how it should
ambiguity
be
there,
taken.
I don't see how there's any ambiguity there.
the
They're either being
difference is
inherently
it's-
dishonest here,
it
or
is
there's some
Okay.
sort of
I
contradiction
mean,
in their
you could,
thinking.
You could call it inherently dishonest.
It's a
but-
disconnect between the sex and the gender here. If you're
Right.
born as a female and
But that's not
the
a socially
genders
constructed
are
thing.
then,
socially
then
derived,
it wouldn't be socially
then
That's
constructed.
not a socially
yeah, no.
constructed
The
thing.
idea of how you should behave as one
Is
No,
socially
no, because your
constructed.
gender is only determined by by being socialized. So it wouldn't even matter what sex you were born as.
You're going to be socialized as a male if you're born with male
Right.
parts.
That's
even
not
though
true.
You resonate as a female.
That's not 100% true. There have
No.
been people that have been.
No, but
It's the exception to the rule.
No, what I'm saying, no, the exception, usually the exception proves the rule if it's a coherent statement. Even by what you're saying that transgenderism is a conflict between sex and gender roles. But if gender is a social construct and sex and gender are not the same thing, then it doesn't matter. If you are born with a male sex and socialized as a female, then
Let's-
you would identify as a female. But if you are a female sex,
but that doesn't
hang
happen.
on.
That's-
If you're a female sex and you're socialized as a female and gender is a social construct, then you would be
so
you would identify as female, but yet there are transgender people. So then, to me, it's a clear contradiction
Okay.
that gender cannot be a social construct.
right, and what they're meaning is not that gender as a whole is a social construct. I think what they're trying to say is gender identification is a social construct.
So why wouldn't they say that then?
because
they think
it's
they're being clear because
right.
they don't have you to point that out
Exactly.
to
They're-
them. If you were, they wouldn't listen.
they,
No, it's obvious.
they're not talking to an it's an obvious
It's blat-
statement.
no,
to
it's
people.
blat- no, it's
They're
blatantly
not-
obvious that to say
I'm
something is a
basically-
social
Cultural
construct-
context.
I'm trying to point
Right.
out here, like,
something is a social
I'm basically
construct
just
is
trying to
saying
say
you're
that,
going
like, to
be
say that, like,
socially
gender-
done to do
To
this.
say that gender,
You're socially constructed, you are going to identify with whatever gender you are socially constructed to be.
Exactly,
That's what a
and that's what
social
we're saying.
construct-
If you're
no.
perceived as a boy,
No, it
you're
doesn't
going to be
matter.
brought up
No.
as a boy,
No, and
regardless
social
of what you
social
want to be.
social construction makes it so that you are associated with that. There is no contradiction with social construction. When it comes to social construction, if you are socially constructed to be a male, there is no background anything. You are
Right.
socially constructed to be a gender, which
Yeah.
means there
Yeah.
would be no
which is
transgender people.
which is what he's saying.
But to say that something is socially constructed in the terms that they're trying to say it, they're trying to say that it's socially constructed as in it's made up, the roles in which we are meant to play. Which is
Yes.
the contradiction in this argument. To say it's a social construct is to say that you will automatically
there's no
be
difference
identified
here.
with
I mean, that's what
If you're
that's what it
being-
means to be
You're
in
saying there's
gender
a double
is the
meaning.
roles
Yes,
that you
no,
play.
I
There
understand.
is no separation between gender and gender roles.
No,
That's
and-
what it means to be a gender, is to play a role.
Right. No, and
it's
I,
not socially constructed, but
this is what they're saying.
There are
Right.
social expectations.
And
of
I
your
understand
No,
exactly
to
where
be
you're
a
coming
female,
from.
even though there are quote unquote expectations or pressures that are put on you, to be a female means to behave in a certain way based on gender, what it means to be female.
See, no, but that's what they're saying. That to be female.
They're saying that
No,
being
to be
female,
female-
is socially constructed, and that cannot be possible.
No, not to be female is socially constructed. To be what a social construction of what a female is
Right.
socially constructed.
No,
a
'cause
female,
Yeah,
a female based on
No.
anatomy, a female based on anatomy has female parts. A male based on anatomy
vagina.
has male parts. The social construct part is the point in which you say a female has long hair.
That
A
still
female
contradicts.
acts in
No,
this way.
that still contradicts transgender people, because transgender has nothing to do with the sex of the person.
Right. No.
No.
Yes, because a transgender person would be, they have female sex, but they identify as a male.
Right.
So
okay.
the sex, so it wouldn't even matter with the point you're bringing up here.
No, the
So-
point that I'm
That's
trying
not-
to bring
that's
up
not
is
relevant.
that the social aspect. that
Those,
is
those are
brought-
not different than being the gender.
No, the social aspect that is brought in causes you to have a conflict, because you're saying a social construct means if you are brought up in that society, you identify with that.
Right.
And that's not always true.
But what
because
he's-
there could be a social construct to follow government.
But
I
what
would say
he's
that it's
saying-
a social construct to follow authority, but yet there are people who contradict to that and deny authority.
Right.
It's the same thing with transgender. It doesn't mean because you're brought up in a society that you are set in that societal way. Just
No.
because it is a social construct does not mean you are 100% identify with that social construct.
You're right, Ian. But
no, he's completely wrong, because
No,
what
Dylan,
no,
hold
stop,
on.
stop. If gender
he's not
is
getting
social-
what you're saying, and you're not getting what he's saying.
No, I getting
No,
what
I
he's
get
saying.
it.
So-
I completely understand what he's
No, you
saying.
don't understand
what
what
he
I
is
understand what you're
saying
saying.
is
A
that
social
if you
construct-
call
if you
forms who
understood,
you
if you
are.
understood what I'm saying, you couldn't say what you're
He's
saying.
he's
No,
saying
I'm
that
taking
a
a different
social
perspective of what a
construct,
social
if
construct
you
is.
label something as purely a social construct, it must be purely constructed based on your social experience. That is what he is saying. He's saying that if it
And you're
is
saying a social
considered
construction
a
is society
social
constructs who you are.
construction, he's saying that
I'm
if
not saying that. That's what these people are saying.
Right. He is saying that if it is labeled as a social construction, it cannot in any way be affected by anything but your social upbringing. It has to be constructed purely by your social upbringing, which is correct. If you're looking at it,
It's the
very
nature versus nurture
logically,
argument. This is a
blatantly.
groundbreaking
Well, no,
nature versus nurture
no,
argument.
but we're
right
not.
now.
We're not even debating whether or not it's nature versus nurture right now.
You're saying that
What he
nurture
is-
nurture says that you can be born in a
No.
male body and have a female identification. That is nurture. That is not your upbringing. That has nothing to do with society. And the nurture
No,
part is saying that a social construct can change who you are.
That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about right now is Dylan is saying that as a social construct, if you were going to label it purely as a social construct, it cannot be affected by anything but the social aspect. That is why he is saying that if it is purely a social construct and you are raised as a female, there's no way you would be able to identify as a male.
So how is that
because
nature
it's
versus
purely
nurture argument?
it isn't. That's what I was just saying.
You're taking a completely
Well, then I
nurture
would say-
perspective because
I
you're
would
saying
say-
that the nurture aspect is that society influences everything.
No.
That someone brought up in
Dylan-
the nurturing environment would be what the nurture says.
I have
it
no
should
idea what
be.
you're going on about here.
Yeah, all he's saying is that by definition, if it is purely a social
Okay,
construct,
take out the word social construct and say nurture because it's
okay,
the same thing.
so if
you
by
are raised-
definition it is purely something that is based on nurture, the only thing that can affect it is nurture.
Okay, and that's
So
the
if
nurture
you're
side of
nurtured-
the nature versus nurture
Right, no,
argument.
no.
Because nature says that you can be born into a
understand what you're
nurturing environment and be
I get what
different.
he's saying, but it has nothing to do with
I don't know what he's saying at all.
I see what you're saying. You're bringing it into
I have no
nature versus
idea.
nurture.
That's
Right.
because
What
that's
he's
how
saying,
it
yeah.
breaks
Social
down.
sciences are
But
right.
that's not the point we're trying to make right now. The point that Dylan is trying to make is that it's very clear that if you call something a social construct, the only thing that can affect the outcome
Yes.
and the building of it is your social experience. Thus, there is no way that your social upbringing would raise you as a female and you would identify as male.
Yeah,
am I
understood
wrong?
that. I understood
Exactly.
that.
Right,
So
right.
I would say
Understood
the
that a long time.
behaviors, the gender identity, is the one that we were talking about, and biologically, that would be a different matter. Transsexuals wouldn't be referring to that as a social construct. That would be
Gender
would be
identity
nature.
is a social
That
That would
would
be
construct.
sex.
nature versus
Yeah,
nurture.
Exactly. That's
Exactly.
a
No,
separate
no,
issue.
this
I
is
agree
not.
with you.
No, then how could you be transgender?
Because you're identifying with the nature argument, saying
Right.
that I am inherently.
I don't know what
born
you're
into a
going. You're
different
just
body.
like nonsensically babbling over there.
I don't
Slow
understand
down
how
and
you
try to like,
nonsensically babbling.
No,
I'm
no,
it
no,
makes
no,
sense.
listen.
down
It's
completely.
not possible, logically, formally. It's not possible to say gender is a social construct and be.
I don't care
transgender.
about the gender construct. That doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that it
This is what I'm
it
saying
is by
here.
definition, people are feeling as though they're
Okay.
in one body and they feel they're a different
Okay,
sex.
you don't
which means that
understand.
doesn't have to do with society.
That's not what I'm
That has to
talking
do
about.
with
Are you
nature.
talking
That's
about
not what I'm
transsexuals
talking
or
about.
transgenders?
That's not what I'm
I think there's a
Transgender. Yeah,
difference.
there are
Listen,
two different.
this is the only point I'm saying. I'm saying if gender is a social construct, then transgender people cannot be possible.
Yes,
Right.
and I understand
And that's a clear
that perspective.
contradiction. I don't know what you're
understand that
going on
perspective.
about
I'm not
nature
saying-
nurture argument.
I'm
That's
just-
not related to what is being
What-
discussed.
Because
what
your
he's doing is he's taking it
perspective
to
on-
an-
Try to
a
keep
next
order
point.
one at a time.
He's trying to take what you're saying and move it to a different point and continue in a different topic area of nature versus nurture rather than going off the argument you were making that it was a contradiction, which
it's more
I think
broad,
we've
right?
all
It
yeah.
defines the categories, but you're bringing it to be
Right,
more broad. Social
um,
construct specific, but that falls within a part of nurture.
Right,
Exactly.
of course. I think gender identity is much more. It's much more acceptable as a social construct because your identity of gender is it is completely socially built. The identities of gender, male and female, are socially constructed. Our society has told us what males do, what females do. Now,
So, I
but
mean-
a gender
But that's
identity.
disconnected
Hang on.
from sex.
This is completely disconnected. So
Right,
No,
whereas
what you're
gender
saying
is not.
makes no sense because this is like a clear chicken and the egg situation. How can you say the roles that society tells us to do are not biologically grounded? And
well-
it's not a mere incidental fact that males walk around with 10 to 20 times more testosterone in their bodies. That affects their behavior and the decisions they make.
Right,
That's
of
not
course.
to discount evolutionary biology and the sexual dimorphism of humans makes no sense.
I think you're discounting sentience, our ability to get over.
No,
acting
because
like a
basically
bull.
by saying gender is a social construct, but what is happening here is people claim that humans are a special, like almost magical type of animal.
Well,
where
we
they're
are,
hang
we
on,
can change
hang
our
on.
behavior.
No, it's a special magical type of animal where because we have a culture, we're able to transcend our biology, which is really not the case. I
Right.
mean, if you actually look at behaviors of how humans, both male and female, it's not clear to just say that it's socially determined or biologically determined. It's a clear mix. But to completely discount the biological evolutionary side of it is nonsensical.
Well, yeah, of course, but
This is not a yeah, of course. People say, and this is the general feeling, that gender is a social construct, and that makes no sense.
I agree that it can't be completely a social construct. Gender identity to say, and transgender in the form of gender identity makes perfect sense. Because at that point, gender identity, rather than just gender, you were raised as a female, but it's all about the identity of the gender that you take. It's no longer you're socialized to one way or the other. It's your personal identity.
Socialization
within that.
definitely takes a place, but there's clear things that you can see universally across cultures.
Well,
For
yeah, of
instance,
course.
like female beautification, using makeup or other beautification techniques to enhance their images is universal across cultures. How they do that is culturally dependent.
Yeah, of course.
No, I think there's cultures where males do the same thing. I don't.
Oh,
think
there are.
that's-
No, there
Is that
are
biologically
no
part of
cultures
us?
where there are no like human cultures where beautification of females is not present,
Right.
and there are no. It's universally true that males try to seek high status positions within their culture.
Yeah.
How that manifests themselves is differently. Within the Western culture, owning a really expensive Porsche or something
Right.
is a high status thing. Where if you're in an African or not African, but some sort of tribe or whatever, you have like water buffalo horn necklace because like look how badass you are.
Right.
There are
Of
real
course.
universals that genders follow, but socialization plays a part in how those are expressed.
Right.
But to claim that gender is just a pure social construct is just completely
Well, yes,
nonsensical.
Of course. Our biology absolutely has a way of playing into that. I'm saying that transgender does exist. There are people who obviously were born into, say, a male body, like me or you, but have no desire to do the same things that we desire to do. Move up, be in a position of any sort of power, control. They want to do things that more fall under the biological nature of the feminine aspect of it, which completely removes it's a social construct. It's very much, we're driven by our biology. Obviously, I don't look at a female that I find attractive and think, would society say, oh man, look at that girl that has on his arm. I don't really think about that when it comes to the primal instinct of what I find physically attractive.
Yeah, like if you look across cultures, what is considered attractive females generally have a 0.7 hip to waist ratio. And it doesn't really have to determine about the size of the female. It's the ratio that's important.
Right.
Which biologically, indicates health. Whether that's, 100% true or not is not the case.
And
But if you
indicates
go to
childbearing.
if you go to the remote region of the Amazon, the females that have a hip to waist ratio of 0.7 are attractive.
Yeah.
As the same as you would in, downtown Paris.
Right, of course. There's a biological intuitive. You see a woman who, her waist and her hips are larger than her waist. You see this concept of this woman isn't going to die during childbirth. She's going to be able to birth
Right.
me more than one child. It's an intuitive thing. You don't look at it and go, oh man, that's attractive because I like the way that those curves are. It's very natural.
Women wouldn't have, females would not have evolved to have large breasts if it wasn't for sexual attraction between separate gender roles. Like you look at other
Right.
primates, that's not a sex characteristic for them.
Right. And I believe that also very much has to do with the intuitive, the reason that we started to find larger breasts more attractive.
I think this is completely
did
generalizing the idea because when it comes to things like transsexuals and homosexuals, when it comes to things like that, it has absolutely nothing to do with reproduction, has absolutely nothing to do with that instinctive mindset of what is attractive. Because when you come to people like
But it
homosexuals, no, a homosexual
I mean,
male
that's-
is not looking to another male to
So-
reproduce.
I mean, this is the
They do not
classic-
find them attractive.
This is
in
what
any
the
way
no. This is what
for
the
reproduction.
this is what homosexuals have argued because in the 80s Christians would say, oh, you're involved
choosing.
you're in deviant behavior, and they say, oh no, this is how we are, and basically nobody's had a response to that.
right.
That is how they
When-
are, but what I'm saying is that is not based on reproductive possibilities. It is
No,
not based
you're-
on a
you're
instinctual
right. But what-
desire
but what
to
the
be
men-
what role you say you are.
What men find attractive in other men in the homosexual community is either you will never find a gay couple where two men act in the way that two men normally act naturally.
So that isn't a social
I've never
construct
met
because you're acting
no,
socially?
No, I've never met a gay couple that has both a male who strives to be at the top and strives to not necessarily nurture so much as take care of their partner and their family, and then a secondary, like their partner, is also that same exact way. That doesn't happen. One person takes on the biological concepts that tend to be of women.
You're saying even within like
even within
in gay couples, they take on disparate, separate roles.
Oh yes, absolutely. There's no way that, and that's what they find attractive, is they find that, opposites attract. We know that in science. Obviously, if you're not a very nurturing person, you would much rather be with someone who's going to take care of you, who is going to, do things like that, and somebody who doesn't necessarily have the drive and determination to do the take caring in the way of paying bills, all that kind of stuff. And generally that has become a male thing just because men biologically have the imperative to work hard to provide. Men want to provide. Women more want to nurture. It's just biologically the estrogen and the way that it interacts with the brain causes them to feel more inclined towards nurturing rather than providing.
Right, yeah, women are much more social. Like, they, as infants, they create eye contact quicker.
Right.
They communicate more. They're more social, where males are more risk-taking, distant, play farther away from their parents at an earlier age.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not all males or all females.
Well, no, of course not.
There
But
might be a
it's
cultural
yeah,
thing
in
too,
the
as a
aggregate.
breeder,
Yeah.
right.
so that
But
Society you're brought up in.
Yeah, there's definitely a cultural and a biological imperative to
Yes.
protect women over men, because
absolutely.
you can lose 3/4 of the male population, and your population, your next, the next generation is not going
Right.
to take a hit.
Right.
If you lose 3/4 of your females, you're in trouble.
Men don't take 9 months
yeah.
to reproduce over and over.
And also, your society with fewer females and a lot of males is just going to create a lot of aggression, I think, and fighting.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Too much testosterone.
But the entire concept is that, yeah, and even in homosexual relationships and even with transgender, if we're getting back to that, transgender, I think, is just someone who was socially constructed to be one way, but they identify completely differently. And that's exactly what it is. They were told socially that if you're a female, this is who you are, and they don't see it that way.
So there's a clear. We'll just stop. We'll pause for a second here. Gender is not a social construct.
Oh, absolutely not. No. Because gender in and of itself has to be a specific statement. And I think gender is more a state of mind that is
Then sex.
constructed
Yeah.
socially.
You think it's a culturally
Gender is-
accepted term for cultural identity, or
Right.
gender
It's a
identity.
state of mind.
Behaviors
It is
expected of a
your
gender.
gender identity.
There are biological behaviors, obviously. like
Right.
Pregnancy.
Right.
How
I mean, there's women who act much more like men than some men, and they don't necessarily identify themselves as a male. They still consider themselves a female. I feel like transgender is more, I see so many masculine traits in me, and I want to be male. Like, that's what I've always identified as. I've always identified myself as one of the guys. I'm a male. That's who I belong grouped in with.
But that's a social construct.
And no, it's just the identity is a social construct.
Exactly.
The
identity
gender
is
is
the
not.
feminists who wanna
The
be
category
male.
you're setting
Lies.
yourself.
Like, it seems like,
Different.
to me, it seems like it would be possible for me to move to a separate country and immerse yourselves within that culture and adapt to it. I don't know if that's possible gender-wise. Like, I couldn't immerse myself in the female gender and become.
No.
To act
Well-
woman-like, you don't think you could immerse yourself by buying?
I don't think they have to immerse themselves. That's the thing.
Yeah, they
is
don't
that
have to.
They
already associate
already,
themselves.
yeah, they've associated with themselves for so long. Obviously, it's not culturally the norm
Oh, yeah,
to
they're not wearing it as a
decide
disguise.
to. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
That's the
exactly.
idea.
They're not trying to immerse themselves in it until it becomes the norm. It's already the norm for them. They see that as who they are. They've identified with that for so long, and the struggle that you would go through having to figure out how to accept that you're different. You feel this way that very few other people feel. You felt that way probably for a long time before you finally decided, I'm done. I can't deal with lying to myself
Right.
anymore.
It's maybe a first on Existential Overdrive, where we maybe have a unanimous position here, which I think is gender is a biological and social construct.
Right.
Unless
Gender-
the Dirty Dago over there has...
Gender is biological. Gender identity is a social
Sure.
construct.
Maybe the Dirty Dago is still at odds with...
No, I'm actually, my final statement is this is exactly what I was talking about when we came into the terms of nature versus nurture. You would say a biological is nature and a social is nurture. This is a nature-nurture
absolutely.
argument, and in saying that they are both on the playing field is a very good position to take.
Yeah,
And
but the
that's what I was trying to get at in
mainstream position...
I was in agreement with you.
The mainstream position here is that gender is a social construct.
No, that was our original argument. And what I was trying to get at with the nature versus nurture is that nature and nurture are both playing parts.
Because
Yes,
we,
but
we
that
will
is not-
split it into a
but that-
biological.
We
That
split
is
it into
socially
biological
drive
and
that.
social.
But that is
nature
not
and
the
nurture.
mainstream position or view. The mainstream position
Mainstream
and
position
view...
is that they are equally on the
No,
playing field.
no, they're not.
that's my
No,
position.
you are wrong.
That's your
You
position.
are wrong.
It's not the mainstream.
The mainstream position is gender
Oh, yeah.
is a social
No,
construct.
and I understand that because I took a class on this in college on gender as a social construct.
Right. Absolutely.
And at the same time, I still, during that class, believed that nature had a very large role in the playing of it, which is
Right.
why I brought that point up originally.
I agree.
All right.
Well, that was Patrick and
Patrick, Reginald, Wolfgang, and the Dirty Dago.
Dirty Dago.
Dirty Dago.
We'll see you all later.